which is Ahmadiyya or the True Islam. Does anybody remember where we were in that book? I, for some reason, have it booked at page 55, but I don't think we got that far. Do you have it with you?
33 pages or something?
Yeah, that was the very beginning. We read up to like page 33 or something. So we could start from there. I use Google Play Books. That's how I keep track. It's really convenient if you want to use your phone. Otherwise, if you have the actual book, that's fine too. But I thought, I know it's tough for all of us to prepare anything beforehand, and I think it's unrealistic to expect that we're going to read like 30 pages on our own and then come discuss it. So I'm totally okay with just reading it here. I can read aloud a few pages, and anytime we get to a point that is interesting or we want to discuss, we can just discuss it. So it's up to you guys how you want to proceed from there. Do you think that's a good idea, or do you want to have people read ahead of time and then come and discuss points?
I think reading it together would probably be better. Like
Yeah.
you said, time is kind of short on everybody.
Yeah, that's what I think too. So should we start from let's see, around page 33 somewhere. I don't know if you use Google Play Books or no.
I do not, but I'm trying to pull it up.
First you have to open Google Play Books and set the there's a setting to allow it to upload a PDF. So you have to turn that on, and then you can go on Google and just type in Ahmadiyya of the True Islam, download the PDF, and then when you click to open it, it'll give you an option that do you want to upload this to Google Play Books. You say yes. Once you upload it, the benefit is on any Android or any device, you can get on an iPhone too, it'll be synced to where you're reading, and you can put book notes, things like that. So I have like 100 books on my phone, and whenever I go, so it's great. I don't have to carry stuff around with me, but whatever people want to do is fine with me. So yeah, it looks like the end of the first section ended on page 35, and the beginning of the next section is page 36, which is the principal objects of religion. Does that sound familiar? Or actually, page 33 is what should be the principal I think we can skip. I think we did talk about that. We can start from page 36. Bill, are you trying to pull it up on your phone also?
Yeah.
Do you have that Google Play Books that I was talking about? You have Android, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to put it up on Google.
We can take a second this time and let everybody get set up. Or actually, I could start reading while you guys are pulling it up. Yeah? You can listen in the background? Okay. So I'm going to start from page 36. The principal objects of religion. And before I start, I guess, this book, as Ranif Sab told us, is about Islam and the West. And it's compiled from, it started out as a speech that Hazrat Muslim Maud gave to a conference of world religions which was held in London. So it was held in the West. And obviously, I forget the date, it was probably the 1940s or something like there. I don't know, I might be totally messing up the date in London. So it was designed as a talk to give to Westerners. So it'll help us in understanding Islam from a Western perspective, in answering questions that Westerners might have, in doing tabligh. So I personally don't want to call this a tabligh class anymore because there may be some political issues with that. So I'm just going to call it a book study. But the book study is for Ahmadiyya or the True Islam, and inshallah one day we'll finish this book, and then when we finish this book we can decide after that what to do. But it's a pretty long book, so we're not going to finish it anytime soon. So I think we can just call it a book study of Ahmadiyya or the True Islam and keep going, and maybe a year from now we might decide that, okay, we'll do a different book or something like that, So anyway, let me start reading. Oh, so we can do a quick tutorial. So on any iPhone or Android, you have iPhone? So you have to download Google Play Books from the App Store first. It's basically a book reading app. Apple has iBooks or whatever. I just use Google Play Books because I was using Android for a long time. But once you have that, then you can upload the book to that, and you can read it on your phone or your tablet or whatever. But for you might even want to do it through iBooks or the Apple version of that. You don't have to use Google Play Books. But they both have Android, and I have Android now again. So, but basically, just go on the browser and search for this book, Ahmadiyya of the True Islam. And when you download it, it should give you an option that you want to open it in iBooks. And the thing about iBooks, it'll keep track of your page, and you'll have it wherever you go. You don't have to remember to carry the book with you. All right, let me start reading here. The principal objects of religion. After these preliminary remarks, I turn to the subject of my paper. There are 4 principal objects of religion. Number 1. The first object of religion is to instruct man as to his source. That is to say, to furnish him with the correct knowledge concerning his Maker, so that he may not be debarred from profiting from the divine source of all power and strength, and should not remain ignorant of the object of his existence, which can be explained only by the Creator himself. For this purpose it is necessary to explain 4 matters: the person and attributes of God, the nature of man's relationship with God, the way in which such relationship should be expressed, and the responsibilities which are laid upon man by God, the means whereby man can attain to God and satisfy his longing for union with Him, and the practical realization that of his object in this very life, so that man may pass beyond the stage of surmise and attain certainty concerning God. So when we look at this first topic, it reminds me of what Azhar Nisab was doing right before I wasn't there for the last 2 classes because I was away in California for the Ijtima, but I know he had us gather some attributes of Allah, and we were supposed to give a little brief talk about that, and that goes right in line with this first topic that Hazrat Muslim has brought up, is that to basically understand who God is and know more about Him so that you can get closer to Him and attain a certainty concerning God, not to just be unsure or think that maybe God exists or He should exist or whatever. So I guess we could pause here, and does anybody remember anything that they prepared on their, even if it's just a really brief thing, we don't have to do anything formal, on their 2, I think it was 2, right? We had 2 attributes assigned to just do a little bit of study on. So if you want, I think it'd be good, we could pass the mic around and just talk. It could, something super simple if you remember what your attributes were and what was the basic thing about them.
I don't know.
You don't remember? You remember your stuff, what yours were?
I have it written down from what you said.
Okay. Salam, once you get set up, you can join us too. Just the 4 of us. You don't have to move the camera, just put it on, whatever.
I'm okay.
Oh, you gotta get in the conversation, man.
Doesn't work. I'll do that later.
I'm going to read these 4 points again. So the first point that's mentioned here is the person and attributes of God. So that's what we were just about to talk about. And then the second point is the nature of man's relationship to God. Third point is the way in which such relationship should be expressed and the responsibilities which are laid upon man by God. And the fourth point is the means whereby man can attain to God and satisfy his longing for union with Him, and the practical realization of this object in this very life, so man can pass beyond the stage of surmise and attain certainty concerning God. I think we could spend the whole day today talking about these 4 things. We don't have to move on, which personally is what I like to do. I like to go in depth as much as possible until we run out of. That's okay. I'll give a brief thing on mine. It was Al-Hayy and Al-Qayyum, which is I actually picked it because Azhar Nisab did a speech on it last Jalsa. I don't know if you guys remember, and it's mentioned I think in 2 places in the Quran, but the most famous place is in Ayatul Kursi. It's Allahu la ilaha illahu al-Hayyul Qayyum, and that's one of the most, I think in one hadith, Holy Prophet ﷺ said that is the best verse, or one of the most important verses. It's a very high status, that one verse of the Quran. And the basic translation of Al-Hayy and Al-Qayyum is the living and the all subsisting. So he lives on his own and he sustains all life. He is the sustainer of all life. And I probably actually have notes here somewhere. But in the idea of trying to understand God more, it's actually something that I wanted to do a year or 2 ago, which is to study all the attributes of God. So I think it was good that we did this, and I mean, I guess I can just give a little thing on this now, and maybe next Wednesday, if somebody wants to prepare a different attribute, just one, and maybe we could do that every Wednesday. We could go over one more attribute or two more attributes of God, just something brief. So, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I just did a little quick research and saved some notes on my phone, but I'll go over this Al-Qayyum. And also another famous, well, not famous, but something to make you realize how important these two attributes are is that I read that the Prophet ﷺ during Tahajjud used to do Ayatul Kursi, and then in Sajda he would just continue to repeat Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum, Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum when he was praying for something. So these are pretty all-encompassing attributes. So Al-Qayyum is the self-subsisting, the self-existing one whom others depend on. The one whose nature it is to exist. He is free from any dependence or anything else for existence. He's the one through whom all other things arise, the one by whom all things are eternally managed aright, the ever-living, self-subsisting one who is the foundation upon which all things exist. And I can go into more detail, but I'll just pick out a couple things here. Here's an interesting quote. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu reported that whenever the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was faced with a serious difficulty, he would raise his head to the sky and supplicate, Subhanallah al-Azim, and then he implored seriously and strongly, he would say, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. So again, using these attributes to pray and showing how important they are. And as far as understanding, like, who God is, I mean, what do you guys think? How can these two attributes help us understand who God is? Like, what is it? It's kind of hard. I mean, I guess you could put it in a practical sense, that how is it in our normal world? Who is somebody who subsists, who sustains other people? Like your parents could sustain you, right? I don't know. What are some other examples? Like trying to understand this relationship between us and Allah and who Allah is, and that I think it's an extremely valid point. If you have a great understanding of the different attributes of Allah, and you can not only tell other people, but for your own relationship with God, it helps you a lot, because you can understand who it is that your master is, not just that he's God, because what does that actually mean? What kind of God is he? What is he? So does anybody want to say, like, what do you think? What does Al-Qayyum make you think of? How does it make you think of God? I'm still looking for the book.
You said that basically the attribute form was what was it?
Just now I was talking about Al-Qayyum, which is the self-subsisting, the one who sustains others, the one whose everything else's existence depends on his existence.
I think the whole idea about self-subsistence is when I look at it, is key. It's because it's not depending upon anything. It is what it is because it is itself, and it doesn't need, nor does it have anything else to exist or coexist or interact. And so I was looking at a movie the other day, and about Greek mythology. And it was the thing about the Titans, the Wrath of the Titans. And up until that point, I really had never paid attention to that. I thought about it, roundabout. But what had happened was, there was a dispute between the gods.
Yeah. In this movie you're saying?
And yes, and I thought, well, how unique that is. And that if you had this God, you had that God, you had this God, you had that God, and for whatever reason they start to disagree. And how wild and crazy that would be. You're not talking about like you or I going at it, you're talking about powerful entities, and the effect that would be, and how great it was that when we look at Allah Ta'ala, we don't have to think about anything because He is coexisting Himself. There's no other God going to say, well, I think that we've got enough over here for this, and maybe we should do that there. Those kind of situations never arise.
Yeah.
And so it brings to the mind perfection.
Yeah, and singularity, right? I mean, he's the only thing that can exist without other things. Everything else depends on his existence, right?
Exactly.
He doesn't depend on anything else.
Exactly.
And that's the only being that is like that.
There's
no other one like
There's
that.
no
Yeah.
interference coming there. There's never been any interference. There never will be. And that in itself,
I think for us it's hard to comprehend that there's a being out there that's basically the start of everything.
Yeah, it is.
For a lot of people around in the world today who don't necessarily believe in God or a higher power, it's hard to comprehend that there's something that started all of this. The way our minds are set up and what we can comprehend on a daily basis is it's very limited to what God is. The whole sense of time and the whole sense of life in itself we really have to step back and really think about where we get all these things that we have and where they come from. And the person, if somebody's given us the sense of sight, smell, and these beautiful things around the world, you can only imagine what he himself is, or what he himself is made out of.
Absolutely. Rafik Saab, you want to join us? Please. Yeah, absolutely. And I think even for us, even for Muslims, and even for somebody who's been trying to understand God better, it's still very difficult. I mean, if someone's gonna ask me to describe God to me, besides using the Arabic attributes and their basic definitions that we learn as a kid, I mean, how do you really describe God to someone else? I think the only way is through experience, and even that experience for me personally is so limited that it's just some examples I can give or something like that, but getting a real picture of God is really hard. It's not easy. It's not something, and I really think that this thing, if you can do it, your spiritual level is through the roof. You know what I mean? I think the people who really know God are the Khalifa, or Prophet ﷺ, Holy Prophet ﷺ. So we're talking about, we're basically trying to continue Azhar Nifsab what he started, and we're going to turn it into a book study of the book that he recommended, Ahmadiyya, or the True Islam. And we're at the part where he left off in the class, and we're talking about that one of the points of religion is to understand your Creator, is to know your Creator, and then know with certainty that He exists and how to interact with Him. That there's Creator type things. So we're right now just talking about attributes of God and how to know your Creator. So I just mentioned that I was researching Al-Hayy and Al-Qayyum because Azhar Nifsab had asked us, I don't know if you were there that day, to prepare something that you were going to talk about, and how does once I gave some definition and some background on it, what does it actually mean? What does it mean to you? How does that shape your image of what God is? And like you said, we're so limited as human beings. When I say paint a picture of God mentally, you can't, because you're automatically drawn to paint a physical picture, right? I mean, how do you paint a picture of this being that doesn't have a face or doesn't have, so it is tough. It's not easy, and I think I love talking about this stuff, so we can talk about it all day. But what do you think, Pisa?
Well, I think that the key word that you said was certainty, and that's where I think I am with it. We're pretty sure that there's something that's in control of all this. You have to. Start thinking about all the amazing things that go on in life in terms of natural and unnatural, seen and unseen, and we have a sense of that, but we don't have a certainty of that. And so a lot of times in our studies we hear this word certainty. To get to that point of certainty as a prophet, like you were saying earlier, the great men of God, they're able to achieve that. They get to that certainty, like the prophet Muhammad, to go into that cave and to be certain that there is something more than what he's experiencing, and then have that experience gave him a real sense of certainty. Yeah. And every one of them, Moses, Jesus, every one of them had, I'm sure at some point had a point of absolute certainty. And I think that because we're exposed to so many external stimulants that keep us distracted from that sense of building that certainty. Now I just performed the itikaf for the end of Ramadan, and We were isolated in a way, and disconnected with all the stimulants, and you started to get a sense of that certainty. You know, you started to get a real feeling that, you know, wow, you know, I feel that power almost that was there. You know, no external things to get in the way, and so until you can kind of remove yourself from these type of environments, it's very challenging for the human mind to really.
But how you do that? How you remove yourself? You mean remove your mind, because you can't remove yourself.
Yeah.
You have to.
And your
actually-
heart.
Yeah, you got to. Your thinking have to change. Your thinking will have to change, and well, I am still struggling with Islam. Let me put it this way. I love Islam since I've been into Islam, and I'm still struggling because sometimes you see stuff and you say, where did these people get this stuff? Like they say, how man was created, you started from apes and all this kind of stuff where it doesn't make any sense, because you could see, there's still apes today. We could go in the zoo and we could see an ape, but we're not seeing that ape turn to man. So where did all these stuff came from? You know, how did man first became aware of God, and where did it come from? You see, we got to go all the way back there, and I don't think my mind or any human mind is really sufficient for that. So, I mean, that's my way of thinking. I don't know if
I can give you my understanding of it. I don't know if it's 100% correct, but it should give you a little bit better understanding than what you have now. You want to say something first?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's amazing because I had this conversation online with someone not too long ago, because they made a reference, and I was telling them basically what you were saying is that you were going up with an attribute of Allah. You were putting a limitation into the law. But then it took me something back that I discovered when I first came into Islam, and that is different than Christianity. And I think it's one of the problems in Christianity that no one has ever really looked at. In Christianity, they never talk about attributes of Allah. It's, you walk to a Christian and say attributes of Allah.
There's nothing about attributes of God in the Bible.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. So what happens is the attributes of Allah, the ones that we have, the ones that we see, okay, you said something that was very, very unique, and it clicked in my mind. It's a certainty. So because we have a limited, we have this limited thing, when we start talking about the attributes, okay, it gives us something to home in on, to figure in on, to start to try to identify something that we can link up to. So when we start to talk about these different attributes and they're pertaining to one being, okay, the certainty all of a sudden starts to grow. And it's like, yo. So when someone, they had said that God is the image of a man, and I said to them, astaghfirullah. Evidently, you don't understand the attributes of Allah, because now you're putting a limitation upon Allah, and that cannot be.
So, you know, yeah, I think that's a powerful point, because we actually were having a discussion some time years ago about this very topic. And one of the things that I thought about was, look, most of us, even in Islam, here in America, when we start to think about God, we automatically start to humanize what it is. As opposed,
it's natural.
It's natural, right? It's like, you know, you make the connection. This is
I
by the Prophet
I don't think
sallallahu.
it's
Give me one
natural.
moment, brother. The Prophet sallallahu, I think it was important when he said, you know, I'm just a man. You know, so in identifying what your effort could be, you know, I'm just a man. So, you know, do what I did and practice the way I practice, and you may be able to create some sense of that in your little world. Because of course we'll never be the Prophet, But the idea that, there's this being, even when you say being, the word being is connected to human being. And so it's a phenomenon. That's what I just started saying. It's a phenomenon that your mind will never ever comprehend. But it did give us the blessing of giving us a group of attributes that say this is the qualities that make me up. And as you begin to dwell, like he said, deeper into the attributes, he is Rahman, gracious. Gracious because I created all of this. Okay? Merciful, Rahman, because I not created it, but I sustain it all. You see, these two powerful attributes, and as you go down the list, and you begin to see he is the protector, he is the provider, he is the loving, all these different things that begin to identify what it is. So, and just quickly go back to what you said about how do you remove yourself, and you said your mind, which is better. Come here, 5 pounds a day. You got a place where you can get away from it all, and you can come right here, and you can interact, reflect, and learn from how to go out when you go out there, because it's all contained in the books. And then, of course, these type of sessions where you get, support. Then now I go out there and say, now I'm encountering life, because we all encounter life, but I have a resource of processing my decision making. And so I can go out now and I can say, okay, there's a bar on the corner. I want to drink. Or do I want to drink? Because what you've built here in terms of your understanding and your relationship will then determine your decision making. And so I think we will never ever, and this is what Malana Sal told me when I was leaving out the mosque on, at last day. He said, once you get out there, it's going to go whoom. It's going to hit you, man, and you're going to say, wow, because you've been removed from it. And now once you re-engage it, it's going to be mind-boggling. So I think that the more opportunities that we get to physically remove ourselves and get ourselves away from it helps us to mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually become better.
I think that, Anthony, what you were saying, I think going along with what the fix-up was just saying, you're coming here, and because this is, it gives you an environment. That's why, it speaks in the Holy Quran, about, being around the righteous and being in places like this. The other thing is this whole idea and this locking into prayer. If you can develop, and I know that's where I kind of am, in developing this your whole idea of prayer. And I'm not saying just your 5 daily prayers. I'm talking about being able to try to go beyond that. One, like in Tajik, because now you're cut off. There's not too many people, there's not too much going on 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So now you are having, and you are engaging in this basic conversation between you and Allah Ta'ala. And the other thing at this particular time is that there was a book, I probably mentioned it, The Attributes of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I was introduced to this book. And I was told the other day by Marana Sahib, and it clicked. That, these are the prayers that, Allah Ta'ala taught the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hey, you want to communicate with me? This is the way you talk to me. Okay? So you start inserting these here prayers in this time that's just you and Allah Ta'ala, like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, Tajid, and you get in the practice of that. Sooner or later, Allah Ta'ala will say, hey, okay, I hear you. Okay, I hear you. And when that, you'll know. But like we're saying, it's the environment that you have. That's why it's and these here things are so important. Because see, we cut all this here interference off. And the focus that we have is on building this spirituality. And the sincerity of that is what Allah Ta'ala starts to answer.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you. I just think that it's very difficult to do that, and I think Brother was trying to make a point as well that how do you do that? It's difficult to remove yourself and then have to go back into it just to earn a living, or just the day-to-days. I think what we need to somehow do is fix the society around us, not just remove ourselves from it. I think we need to understand what's going on in society and bring what we want to see in society around us so that it's more sustainable, rather than just removing ourselves from it, because that becomes an internal struggle. I know I struggle with it, removing myself from something and then going back into it it's very it's hard to deal with on a daily basis.
That's an
painful,
important
so-
point that you just made there, as far as setting out the environment outside of this environment here. Yeah, we are, and that's what I was always saying, that we were safe inside that mosque at that time for those 10 days and completely removed from it all. You felt really good about you.
Who was saying last night? Wasn't Idris was saying that when he comes to the mosque, he feels safe. Any Ahmadi mosque he goes through around
Right.
the whole world, you
Yeah.
feel safe.
Right,
You know?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what the brother said about, creating environments outside of the mosque, and this is one of the roles of what our communities are supposed to be doing as Muslims. We're supposed to be extending ourselves out there so that the environment out there now becomes consistent with what we are doing inside of here. And I think that's one of the issues that we have as faith-based communities, not only just mosques, but even churches at one time extended themselves out to the community. And so you could gain some things.
Can I address that just real quick? I'll tell you. It was
That's our biggest problem.
it was the Ishtima. I want to get it right. I know it was the it was the Joseph in Qadian. I wasn't there last year, so it must have been the year before last when I was in Qadian. Hazur addressed this very thing, and when it comes down to it, one of the reasons that it sticks in my mind, as most of you know, I can understand Urdu, Hazur's Urdu is just as pure as it wants to be. So I'm sitting there, and there's a group of us, but there was no headsets. And Hazur was talking. He was giving a speech. And during the speech, he had said that the fate of mankind, was in the hands of the Ahmadis. And it has nothing to do with guns and planes and bombs and stuff like that there. What we have to do, and this is what we have to do, is we have to build our morality and spirituality. And we can only do that in prayer. That takes time. I'm not saying that you're going to start today and all of a sudden at the end of the week or next week this your time, you've established your CA report and whatnot. No, but this is what we have to do. This is why these groups and stuff are so important. It's because we're getting around us. And the more we get around us and the more we share about us, especially in different generations that we have here, and this is where that morality and that spirituality starts to grow and take root. And it starts to grow and take root until, like, in your everyday life is where you start to affect people.
Yeah, but I think going back to that point that he made, that's huge.
Yes.
Because, I would think about my sons, they come out, when they, God bless them, they're good dudes. But, when they come out and they're back out in there, they're there. So it's like, where can I send them to recreational? Where's an environment out there conducive to what this is teaching here? It's just not many out there. And so you're exposed to all this stuff. So even say the immediate area would be great if we get something right out the door here, but people don't live here in this particular community. But what is out there that is a safe place for a younger person?
So with anything that's a philosophy, there's a thesis and antithesis. So for example, the Ahmadiyya thesis is Islam, right? And then what's the antithesis? the Antichrist, at least for this era. I mean, that's what was predicted, right? So, at this point in time, there's a struggle between Christ and Antichrist. So now we come into the fact that how do we help the people here? So, what was the thesis was Islam. And how do we practice that through the Holy Quran and our leadership, which is the Khalifa. So now the question comes about, how do you communicate this to people? So the reason we're having these classes is that there are two elements of any religion. There's duty to God that we have in terms of religion, salat, and then there's duty to mankind. But those are also just, that's just, theory. In practice, how was it practiced? So the Holy Prophet ﷺ, what he did was, he helped people. His personality was magnetic. So not only did he have a thesis, Islam, but he also had ability to practice it. His lifestyle was an embodiment of Islam. So when we go out in the society, what is the way we have to communicate with people? First, people nowadays, they see everyone as users and abusers. They'll see them as, they'll have some sort of agenda with you, and then they'll use you as much as they can for that agenda and abuse you until they can fulfill their own agenda. So once they see that somebody has a genuine interest in something, and to help someone, they'll say, okay, this person looks genuine. And people can pick up on that. Anybody, any common person can pick up on, okay, is this person actually helping me, or is this person having an agenda? So in Islam, we're trying to help mankind out, and by command of Allah. So if we really want to look how we're going to fix the world nowadays, just look at the way the Prophet ﷺ has taught us. So the thesis is Islam, and antithesis is the Antichrist. So what did he say? You're right, there's no planes or tanks or any type of army that's going to fix any of this. It's a war of information. So what did we do 20, 30 years ago in terms of information? We wrote books, passed out pamphlets, right? We had newsletters. We had our own way of communicating with the public to show people that we have information and we want to give it out, and we're going to spend our time to give that information. So today, the thing that Hazur has been emphasizing the most is tabligh. But what is actually tabligh? It's to spread information. So that's really what we have right now, to spread information. And of course, the masjid is very, very integral to this, because we have to have some sort of headquarters. Just like any military base, you have to have some sort of headquarters in which you establish some sort of game plan. And out of that headquarters, you're spreading about, whatever mission it is. In this case, it's a mission of tabligh, to help people around you by, one, giving them information. But giving someone information is just one step. You have to show them that you actually care. So there's a multi-level approach to this. But in the very, very essence of at least Ahmadiyya, what we're seeing is that first we had to establish some sort of authority to Islam, which is the Khilafah, through the Promised Messiah. And then after that, after we gained that leadership and we had the unity, then the directives came about. The directive of tabligh, the directive of a lot of these other schemes too. Now the question is that how does that even translate in today's American society? That's the real question we have to be asking. Like, how can we make our thesis, how can we make Islam something that the Americans at least respect? Because nowadays we'll be on the news, but we'll get used in abuse because they have their own agenda too. And we recognized this before too. And, 100 years ago when we produced our own items, we produced things in the paper, but we had to have our own, publications.
So I completely agree with everything that you're saying, but I think the main point once again is the people that are in the community need to truly believe and have that faith before we can even go out and start doing tabligh and preach, which is what Azhar and Nifsa was trying to do. So I completely agree with everything you're saying, but I think we're still at the point of internally trying to figure out how to, in a sense, fight our demons, so that we can go out and be the people and preach and do all the things that we're doing. So
You're exactly right.
So thanks for saying that. Let's try to stay with the book, because I think the book is going to get us through all of these things we've all talked about. I mean, personally, I don't like stopping you guys from talking, because I also believe Company of the Righteous ends up giving you the right answer. And we've seen this in Qadam. You've been there for some of the discussions where I don't know what the right answer is, or I don't tell everybody what the right answer is. and you guys come up with it on your own. Just by having a bunch of Qudam get together and argue about it, you come up with the right answer, and then I say, hey, check it out, this is what the Khalifa said too. You didn't know that, but this is what the Khalifa said too, or this is what the Prophet said too, or whatever. So, but that being said, we can easily go way off topic, and but let's stick with what we're talking about in the book, and if we're done with that topic, we'll move on. But let's say, are we, obviously we're not, we could spend forever on this topic, but the first part was the attributes of Allah, right? So we're talking about understanding the attributes of Allah, and I think we were talking about it for a while, and then we started to kind of go off track, and I think you mentioned that studying those attributes gives you a better understanding of who God is, and I was trying to say, and you even said it, that like, but how do you actually paint some kind of image? Like, I don't know if you guys know, there's a hadith about that, a believer should pray as if he sees God in front of him. So what do you see? What are you imagining? What are you thinking about? What are you feeling? And you had mentioned when I said that it's natural for humans to personify stuff that is not natural. I think it is, but that's a subjective thing. I just think that we know what we know, so we automatically are going to put it towards something that we know. So one way that I think you can understand things is to actually use this world as a way to understand something. Like, we often give the example of a child crying to the mother. In fact, Hazur has given this example many times in recent khutbahs, that when the child cries to the mother, the milk comes out for the child. The milk could not be there, and when she hears the cries of her child, it just automatically comes out. And he says this is how God's mercy is too. So this is a way to use our normal, little, puny understanding of the world. And like, when you have a kid and you see your wife and you see that happen, it's like, wow, like, this is how I'm supposed to pray. And it really, honestly, I think one of the main reasons why Holy Prophet ﷺ said that marriage is half of your faith is because a lot of those experiences lead you to understand how your relationship with God should be. It gives you a deeper understanding. So that being said, we can look into attributes of Allah and then try to understand them through our own human lens, through what we understand. But I think another way to understand them is to try to pray using that attribute. And for example, we talked about how Holy Prophet ﷺ used to pray Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum, Prophet ﷺ did as well. And Azhar Nisab, one of the other things he taught us in the very beginning was that prayer that he told us to do it 3 times after every salat. That was La ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulk wa lahul hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, right? And the end of that prayer is that, and Allah has power over all things, So when you're in a prayer, there could be something in your life that's bothering you at this moment, and to realize that God could change that thing just like that, like He has the power to do anything He wants to have, so that in that way you're using that attribute of God and you're praying on that attribute of God, and when God answers your prayer, you now have an experience of that, and you've painted a little picture in your mind of that. This is what my God does. This is what He can do. This is who He is. So that's kind of my experience of that. That how you can actually start to understand God and how you can have a relationship with Him, and you can have something to explain more than just words. I think it's very important to have experience and not just. And Azhar Nisab said this as well. And it's funny. Like, I never knew that prayer, but I know other prayers like it. And just him emphasizing that prayer over 2 or 3 classes, and I started doing it. It made a big difference in my spirituality, and it was just such a simple thing, And I hope that we can continue to bring up stuff like that helps each other, because he's probably not going to be here, But inshallah, through the company of the righteous, we can keep doing that. But that was my point on the attributes. That take an attribute, try to learn about it, and then pray about it. And I'll give you one more example before I continue. So, in my own personal life, I started another kind of business. I have 2 businesses now. And the second business is a lot more stressful than my old one, and that's probably because the old one is 3-4 years old, and it's like kind of set in stone, and I know what I'm doing, and it's, you just go to work and do your job and whatever. So a lot of times, even during Ramadan and before Ramadan, before I started this business, I was doing really good with my prayers. I was focused. I was able to pray a lot more than I was before, and really connect, like on almost every single prayer. And when I started this business, it went down the drain. Like, I'd be, even in the morning, even at the Hajjah time, I'd be thinking about stuff that was going wrong with my business. And it made me so mad that, like, I'm sitting here trying to pray, and all I can think about is that, like, this guy, I need to talk to him about this, and he's not doing this right, and I'm over budget here, and I'm delayed, and blah, 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 blah. And I don't even really care. Honestly, like, especially at prayer time, I don't want to care about my business, but I couldn't get it out of my head. So I started praying that, oh Allah, you have the power over all this. Remove this burden from me so that I can worship you properly. That I don't, at least, like, during the day when I'm working, that's fine, I'll deal with it. But I don't want to be so involved in it that I take it to the prayer with me. And it worked. And in fact, one other thing that Azra Nisab said that struck me, and we were talking about certainty, right? I don't know if you guys remember, I asked him that day that I read that Prophet ﷺ said, and this is true, that perfect certainty comes with revelation. You know, I'm like, so how the heck are we ever going to get there, right? How are we going to get to the point where we're getting revelation? And he was like, no, there's two different types of certainties. He said there's one certainty that you are certain that God exists, you have a relationship with Him, He answers your prayers, and then there's that perfect certainty, which is when you get revelation. So he was talking about that first level of certainty. And he said that the way you know that you have that is that you should be constantly getting some prayers answered or constantly seeing some little signs that are pointing you in that direction. And I thought about it and I was like, how can I get more of that? You know, and by praying like this, it really has helped me a lot. And I've had times where I pray and like a few hours later, that guy calls me on his own and has fixed the problem without me even telling him stuff. Like and I'm just like, so, and the best thing that happens, honestly, is that at that moment, I can forget about that during the prayer and I can start praying properly. You know, and that's really what I want. That's all, even if the whole world goes wrong and my business fails, I don't really care, as long as I can still focus on my prayer. But I think that those are just some things that I've been going through that help me to understand God and try to, increase my relationship with God. So, please go ahead.
That's great, great, because, that prayer that you said, the one that Malana Sahib said that we should say after the prayer. I mean, there's all these little things that you do to bring you closer. So while we were in the Itikaf, we learned the Tasbih prayer, which is two versions, but it's 300 repetitions of glorifying God. It takes a period of time to do that. And so you start to build a sense of this connection by just repeating these glorifications. And so it's very, very important. I went through the same experience you did when I first started off Itikaf. And it's like I'm, trying to, got stuff on my mind about my business. And I'm saying, boy, and that's this promotion and I'm behind. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like, get out my head.
Yeah,
get out my head.
Trying to yell at it.
Get out of my head,
yeah.
please. I'm trying to focus on this experience. And it was really, really challenging. But once it started, then it was okay. And it's kind of like by the time I ended, it was completely okay. But I think what you were saying about as far as having real life experiences where it's clear to me that God guides me. He guided me here tonight. I mean, I had stuff I met the call, but the important thing for me was, okay, Asr's in, I missed it. I need to get up there and get Asr in, and then maybe I'll get the Maghrib in, and I'll walk into all this, and it's like SubhanAllah.
Yeah. I actually forgot to let you know that we were doing this.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. And it's like, that's the kind of thing, it's like, I'll add the other part, what you said about, if we pray as if we see God, or if He sees as if He sees us.
That's the second part.
And that's the second part of that. So it's this thing. Even when I'm like communicating, I feel like I have a relationship. So here's my relationship. This is what I do. I express myself through the prayer. I've said what I wanted to say. Now I pick up the word of God Almighty, His Holy Quran, and now He's talking to me. So we have this dynamic. And I think that's how you kind of build this sense of certainty at the level that Malana Sahib was talking about, is to have that type of engagement. The one thing I did want to say is this, because it was spooky almost, as far as the environment in which Huzur has told us that we should be doing. He told us that in UK 2 years ago when we were over there, brother. And I just need to emphasize again what he was saying, because we see what's going on, and it was simple. Prayer. Hazor said that we have to pray in a way now that we've never prayed before, because of what the environment is. And so we have been prepared, hopefully, through our experience as being members of the Ahmadiyya community, to learn to pray in a way that most don't. And so that's very relevant to turning the situation around so that, as you said earlier, that we don't end up eliminated, because it could happen. I mean, I think sometimes, like God, He looks there. I just saw somebody today. He's probably looking down on His creation, and He's saying, "This is madness." It's like, what's wrong with these people? I've given you everything. I've given you everything. Go into sort of our Rahman, and prayer, I mean, that whole chapter is Allah saying, these are all the things that I've given you. And so which favor will you deny? Over and over and over and over through that chapter. And so those are the things, you know, as you said, earlier about us internally, trying to improve ourselves. You know, hey, we have to get down with the basic Assalamu alaikum, what's your name? Before you can go out there and save the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Fundamental stuff. So I think that everything, I mean, I'm just amazed that God Almighty, and this is why I feel like answered a prayer that I was not even seeking. He'll sometimes give me stuff. He said, come on to the mosque, your brothers are there. They're having a wonderful discussion.
Let me go over these points one more time, and then we can talk about them a little bit more. I don't know if we'll see. We might move on. But so the 4 points. The main point of the first object was that the religion should instruct man as to his source, and those points were, what are the person and attributes of God, and even Second Khalifa calls it the person of God, right? I mean, so he's even using the terminology. The nature of man's relationship with God, we touched on that also just now and before. The way in which such a relationship should be expressed, we touched on that also. The responsibilities that are laid upon man by God, I don't think we touched on that much yet. And then the means whereby man can attain to God and satisfy his longing for union with Him, and the practical realization of this object in this very life, so that man may pass beyond the stage of surmise and attain certainty concerning God. I think we talked about that as well. And we can talk more about it. And I think the one thing we didn't talk about is what are the responsibilities which are laid upon man by God. And the one thing that strikes me in all of these things is the thing that I keep coming back to as I try to become closer to God is that it's about feeling and it's about love. That's what it's really about. It's not about anything else. And if you look in the Quran, anytime God describes your relationship, He talks about the qalb, which is the heart. He never says the brain. He never ever, not once does He mention in the Quran anything to do with the brain in relationship to your faith. Your faith is based on your heart. It's not based on your head. And if you put it too much in your head, you're never going to get it. You're never ever going to get it. You got to get it through your heart, and you got to get it through feeling. And the feeling is where you're going to see God. You're going to feel Him. You're not really going to see Him, obviously, right? We know that. So just that's the one point that I've never, it's been the last 10 years since I, on my own, decided that I wanted to be a Muslim in an Ahmadi, not because I was born this way, but because I wanted to be this way. And in 10 years of trying to get closer to God, this is the only one thing. If somebody was to ask me one thing, it's love. Love is the only thing. And that's what even Azhar Nifsab started the whole thing with, is that you got to love God, and then you got to love people so that you say, hey, I love you, I want the best for you, so here, you got to meet my friend, big guy upstairs, you know what I mean? Because I love him as well. It's all about love. There's nothing else going on. But anybody want to talk about anything else in relation to this? And then we can also bring up the responsibilities that are laid upon man by God.
So the first point you mentioned was that personification, or
the person and attributes of God.
Yeah.
We were talking about that while you were sitting over there.
Yeah. So that's actually wanted to, because I remember he told us all to do an attribute, right? And I actually remember when Al-Halik, the creator.
You want to? Yeah. I was asking people to talk about it. So you sure you can give a little blurb?
Yeah. So basically, I was looking into this, and first things first. In terms of attributes, these are attributes only we can perceive. I mean, the attributes could be limitless, but in this universe, as far as we can perceive, these are attributes that God manifests Himself in. But in terms of the creation, there are people who try to.
Yours was the creator, Al-Khaliq.
Al-Khaliq.
And that translates to the creator.
I think the creator.
Yes.
The one who creates.
Yes. One creates.
And the thing that a lot of people do who don't really have a relationship with God, they like to try to demystify God. And what that means is that they'll try to explain the universe in such a way that if there is a God, then it's just a machine. It's not. And the reason why I was focusing on the word person is that in Islam, we understand that Allah is an entity alone. Allah is not an entity that is like a machine. And the way I can describe this is that people have for example, a common belief. People think the universe is infinite, and which it is, and that creation is infinite, which it is, because for God to be Al-Khaliq, He has to be creating forever, at all times, at all situations. Yeah. So people have a concept. They're like, okay, let's make God a machine. that means that there are infinite amount of Sauds doing infinite amount of things that are similar to what he's doing now with diverging things of what Saud's doing. This is actually wrong, and the reason why is that makes God a machine. People don't even have the concept of infinity, because what that means is that Saud could be sitting here, but there's also an infinite amount of universes where Saud doesn't exist. Because it's infinite.
What about if you're trying to understand God and you understand him in a machine-like fashion, it means that for every input there's the exact same reaction.
Exactly.
And that's not true.
That's not
true.
true.
And that's
either.
where he's more like a person. Because we don't have the same reaction.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody might make us mad, and then sometimes we're in a good mood and we might not care, right? I mean, and this is what we learn in the Quran about God as well, right?
So the reason why they mention God like this is because they like to say that in another universe, I'm a religious person. In this universe, I'm not religious.
Oh,
So
wow.
it doesn't matter because it's blind creation. And they like to say this is just, even if God exists and he's creating with these infinite amount of universes, it doesn't matter because God knows what the outcome is. But in truth be told, with infinity, there's infinite amount of possibilities. That means that there are infinite amount of possibilities that don't exist also. So when people look at God, when they try to look at him as like a machine, it's a failure concept, because what that means, it's not a living God. It's a dead God.
Yeah.
That
It's like a program.
it's a program, which is false. And Islam doesn't recognize that. That's why we have the concept of revelation after, the law has been passed down, because we understand that God's a living God that communicates with man at a personal level.
You were asking this yesterday, that people, a lot of the Muslims you talk to, they don't accept that we believe that there could be prophets after the Holy Prophet ﷺ. This is one of the rebuttals to that, is that by saying that there cannot be revelation after the Holy Prophet ﷺ, you are basically sealing God's lips. And who are we to say that God can't speak anymore, right?
Right.
So that's one of the primary, you put the seed of that in someone's mind, you're not going to accept it right away. But if they go home and they start thinking about that, yeah, God can do whatever he wants. If he wanted to speak to someone, he could. How are we going to stop him? How are we going to say that he's never going to speak to someone again? Right? So go ahead.
So now I wanted to add my attributes, because when we were told to pick attributes, I actually picked one, and I said, that's a pretty popular one, but it just resonated with me. But then the other one popped in along with it, Sami and Ali, and I am all hearing, I am all knowing, and that's kind of like, it encompasses it all. If you put it in your mind, it's not going to be as effective as if you put it in your heart. Because like the mind is constantly challenging you. And your knowledge is always challenging you. But once it's in your heart, and you really begin to see true evidence of, I do, know all. I was in Hajj, and I would get these really lonely feelings because I was there by myself. I hadn't gone with anybody. No Americans, no other brothers from our community, nobody. It was me by myself, and at times I would get so lonely. I would sit in that hotel room and I'd be like, God, I feel like I'm so alone. And I could imagine what Abu Bakr Siddiq and the Prophet ﷺ experienced when they were in the cave and the Meccans were upon them. And Abu Bakr Siddiq, he got a little nervous. And the Prophet ﷺ said, there's a third. He's got a sense of, there's a third with us. And he's like, who? Where? It's like, And so that's why we're taught the prayers of sort of Das. There's a whisper. Seek my protection from that. It's whispering to you. So all of these things that Allah has put out there in terms of the verbiage is for us to say, to reflect upon, and then to say, to implement. If I say he all hearing, and then he knows that I'm sitting here and I'm trying to concentrate, I can just say that to him, and he can create in an instant the clarity that I'm trying to achieve. But I first have to believe that he is all knowing. He is all hearing. So these are things that I think, in terms of go back to what we were talking about tonight, is building on, is the attributes. Very, very important, as I was saying, where there's a weakness in our, the Christian doctrines, is that they're just, Jesus saves me. And that's, I'm cool. It's no real sense of this omnipotence that can actually save me. because I don't have a sense of that. I've not been taught that.
We're at the mosque. Are you coming?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the real key point in that. In any religion, you can tell how developed it is by basic things like this. Like how does it look at, for example, its own
Okay,
entity?
hold on.
So
I'm gonna put you on speakerphone. Say salam to everybody. Bashir Saab was gonna join us. Bashir is in town.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Eid Mubarak to everyone that I didn't talk to yesterday. I was going to come tonight, but inshallah for sure tomorrow I'll try to make it. But I don't know.
I won't be there tomorrow. But
Day, you know?
actually, there's an Amla meeting tomorrow. I'm gonna be here. Yeah. We got Saad, Yahya Saab, Khalil Saab, myself, Abdul Salam, and Rafiq Saab here.
I'll come and get you where you're at.
He said he's stuck at the mall waiting for his kids.
Oh man, I was really trying to make it tonight. Yeah, he got me stuck over here shopping.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll try to see you when I come back next week.
Okay.
Inshallah.
All right, Bashir Saab.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right, inshallah, remember to your prayers. We're all praying for everybody here as well. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
So the reason why, I mean, it resonated with me when you guys mentioned Christianity and the attributes. In terms of religion, we're judged upon our ability to make choice. Meaning that if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, do salat, that's different. Or say somebody puts a gun to your head and sin, to say, do this sin. That's not a sin. You're obligated to do it. But in this sense, when you have these attributes and you learn about them, then when you experience them in the real life, for example, as Niaz was saying, as you grow up and you experience different things, those choices are what allow you to become more righteous, because you have those choices. For example, if you're someone who's mentally deficient, at that point in time, if you sin, it's not considered as much of a sin as somebody who understands exactly what they're doing. So that's why actually the Prophet Messiah and I think the philosophy teaching mentioned that at the age of 40, when you're old enough that you have to take care of your parents but also your children, that's the real age of the birth of actually the like the flowering of the soul. So in Christianity, when we have a lapse of understanding these attributes, what they're doing is that they're allowing people to. It's like a very basic, elementary teaching of religion. Because what happens now is that those attributes allow us to understand how to have a relationship with God in many different ways. For example, the creator is the sustainer. Rab, I think Rab's the provider, right?
Rab is Lord, but yeah.
That's
And for example, Ram, the merciful.
Yeah.
And how that translates into different fact. I mean, Ram itself is womb, isn't it? Or is that?
Ram?
Yeah, it's
From Rahim?
it's similar. I remember people talking about it as like a womb,
Like a womb.
like a mother's womb.
Oh yeah, you could say that. I mean,
So I mean, when we come
everything is provided for the
Exactly.
child, right? Like, yeah. You could
So
say that.
when we come into these experiences in life, how we deal with them, I mean, that's reflected upon our experience with God. For example, when a mother is about to give birth, she understands that this child, the relationship I have with this child, is the same relationship God has with me and my soul. And at that point in time, we have to understand that's what really religion is to teach man how to have a relationship with God. That's why it's very important that we have these attributes, because it gives man the toolbox to interact with God. That's why it's important to discuss these things, because without the toolbox of how to interact with God, how are we going to interact with one another if we don't know how to interact with God?
So just 2 quick points, right? I think one, we should probably stay away from, or try to stay away from, calling out other religions or what their beliefs are, because I think one of the points that Azhar Musa said was we should be inclusive and try to
We could
build
have a
it
whole
on the
class
one
about
block.
that, right?
Instead of calling out other religions on their beliefs. The second point, now that I say that, I can't remember what my second point was.
I had something that I think it would be a good exercise. Maybe it'll end quicker than I think, but you had started to mention the way other people try to make God into like some sort of program, that there's like a equal action reaction for everything, and we do believe that He is the most just. So in that way, He is the most fair in determining these things. But I thought we should talk about what are some of the basic objections to God that are going around in society. Like, for example, many people will say that, how is your God merciful when he allowed the Holocaust to happen? How is your, you know, like this kind of thing. How is your God really Rahim or Rahman and Rahim when he, you know, like a child will have cancer and die when they're 5 and blah, you know, those kind of, there's a lot of these different things. And I think even for us, if we don't have a proper understanding of this, at some point in our life we could face a trial that could totally derail us from our faith. What if my child, God forbid, gets cancer and I start feeling that way? You know what I mean? Or what if something like that happens to me? You know. So I think these are some ways that we can also talk about attributes of God and kind of debunk. And you gave me the idea by talking about what other people try to make God into. That we should probably bring these up. That what are the things you hear outside in society, or maybe what are the things you don't have to say that you're feeling it yourself. But what are some of the things that you can't understand about God that don't make sense to you, that seem like, you know, they're messed up, or seem like for example, why did God create evil in the first place, right? You mentioned Surah Nas. What about in Surah Falaq, that protect me from the evil which you have created? Why did God even create evil if he wants us to be good and he wants us to go to heaven? You know, like, so like there's good explanations of all these things. But I think if we talk about them, it'll help us to understand better, and also when we go out to talk to other people, it'll help us to explain better. So what do you think? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you want to bring up more points? I mean, we can talk about the ones I just mentioned, or we can talk about other ones, whatever you guys want. What's on your mind? Like, what do you want to talk about?
I think the other point that I was trying to make was just that that having the tools to speak to God and listen to what He's saying. I think first you somehow have to believe that there is a God. A lot of people that I've talked to, that having that in your heart, even having the daily experiences, some people just see it as it was ironic that happened, or it was a coincidence that happened.
And they will. Even if you tell them about your prayer getting answered, they'll just say it's a coincidence.
Right, or something that you did yourself, or, you know, like you worked hard for this promotion, or you did X, Y, and Z. But the point is that there's something behind the reason why I was able to do those things. But that point is really hard to get across to other people. And I think that's the point where I struggle at, and that's when I just kind of leave that point alone, and I just show the things that have happened positively in my life and my belief. And, you know, I don't know if people take that as a positive, you know, maybe down the road they'll think back and be like, oh, this person believed really truly deep down inside that there was a higher power and all these positive things happen. But I do want to talk about the negative things, because that's another thing that people come across. Like, if there is a God that's so nice and so Rahman and Rahim, like, why is all this bad stuff happening in the world?
Yeah, that's a good answer. So back to your point about love, and that actually relates to that. So, for example, like, how do you communicate with people that there's a relationship you have with God? So, I mean, we were talking about the relationship you have with God in a personal level. It begins with love. So it's the duty to God because you love God, and then you have a duty to man because you love man. So at that point in time, when somebody sees that you worship God, and they're like, okay, that's a coincidence. It's a coincidence that your life is like the way it is. But at that point in time, what did the Holy Prophet ﷺ do to inspire people? He himself lived a very, very difficult life. But in that difficulty, he himself was at peace. And on top of that, he helped other people in that state. For example, there's stories of people who threw trash on him. A lady threw trash on him, and one day she didn't, and he was concerned about her health. At that point in time, when she realized that this man is more concerned about my health and less about the trash I threw upon him, this man's at such a level of peace that this is something that I don't understand anymore. There's not a coincidence here, because there's something I don't understand. That's why when people describe, for example, the state of hell that people are in, it's like fire. So people, when they see that, for example, someone is in, I mean, the world itself, you could say that for a certain person, the same location could be hell, or the same location for another person could be heaven. When somebody who's in hell sees someone else in a similar situation, but their outlook, I mean, on the outside it's all fire, but they're walking like it's, you know, they're walking on a flower bed, like it's nothing for them. At that point in time, when they see that internal peace, they themselves start to question their situation, because that's how human nature is. People, when they see that, okay, what's the disconnect here? There's something not logical here that I don't understand, that I need to figure out. And on top of that, when that person says that, hey, look, I'm here, you know, let me be a source of mercy for you, that disconnect even becomes greater. That's why in Islam, in the greatest instances of conversion have been through mercy. haven't been through a lot. I haven't heard
None
of
of
any.
them been through logic.
That's what I was saying. There's no debates, like great Muslim debates that I've heard of in history that they've converted this many people because there's some sort of debate and they won the debate.
Well, hold on a second. There was, when the eclipse happened, the sign for Prophet ﷺ, the 2 eclipses during Ramadan, I read that thousands of people converted.
Those were
to
Muslims,
Ahmadiyya.
though.
They were already Muslim. They were waiting for this sign to happen.
That's
this is like a prophesied
because
sign.
they already had a relationship with
Yeah,
God and
that's
they
true.
believed.
But you're right. Again, it comes back to love, not forcing, not arguing with people. You know, you can argue and you can plant like a thought in their head and say, go think about it, but do it with love, right? You know, don't try to win the argument. You didn't win anything when you won the argument. And this was one of the first things Azar Nishad talked about too, right? The very first week, he was like, you know, I used to do that when I was a young missionary, and I would go and win every argument, and then all of a sudden I lost all my friends. You know, like, so there's the valid point to all that.
I wanted just to go back to what we were talking about. Saud was mentioning about the suffering, and you were talking about the evil. The fourth Khalifa wrote a book, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge, and Truth, where he spoke to this particular subject. And I'm just going to read just a little excerpt from that. And he says, we understand from the Holy Quran that God did not create suffering as an independent entity in its own right, but only as an indispensable counterpart of pleasure and comfort. The absence of happiness is suffering, which is like its shadow, just as darkness is the shadow cast by the absence of light. If there is life, there has to be death. Both are situated at the extreme poles of the same plane, with innumerable grades and shades in between. As we move away from death, we gradually move towards a state of life, which is happiness. As we move away from life, we move away with a sense of loss and sorrow towards death. This is key to understanding the struggle for existence, which in turn leads to constant improvement in the quality of life. It helps to achieve the ultimate goal of evolution. The principle survival of the fittest plays an integral role in this grand scheme of evolution. This phenomenon is mentioned in the Holy Quran in the following verse, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. This is from, well, I don't have a reference. I think it's Mulk. Blessed is he in whose hands is the kingdom. He has the power over all things. Qul Shayn Qadir. Is he who has created, Qalaq, death and life, that he may try you. Which is best in these? He is the mighty, the most forgiving. In the beginning of this chapter, he talks about and the rudimentary forms of loss and gains, and that this is what really is happening. It just evolved into now a sense of consciousness where we witness it, as opposed to these rudimentary forms of life. It's the same types of sufferings are going on. I mean, there's a fungus in the Congo jungles that has to be on the floor of the jungle that comes out in the night that destroy the plant life that is falling on the floor of the forest. If this fungus is not destroying that life, that some of it still in is alive, but it destroys it, because if it doesn't, then it says that this stuff would power high to the trees. But Allah in His wisdom had a self-destruct mechanism in play. Now we're not on that rudimentary form, and it's necessary for that to be in play. It's just like sometimes fires happen, and sometimes they put what they call controlled fires, so that life can exist. But it's people that say, hey, burning up the forest, you see? So this phenomenon of suffering is just something that we're acutely aware of. And then it starts to work on the heart, and pull at the heartstrings. So that's a basic understanding from my limited perspective.
So this is a short, but I mean, as humans, the fact that we're here is through suffering. Everything that has died, that was before us. I mean, before we were humans, whatever we were before, every stage and level, there had to be competition, there had to be death, there had to be something for us to reach a higher level. Right now, we're at a stage where the entire world is on fire, but the reason why is that the world has disobeyed. At one point, we could be annihilated, but at another point, there could be a golden era that comes out of this. That's what we believe as Ahmadis. There will be a golden era. But at the same time, because of them disobeying, because of them abusing the power that they have now, they have destroyed themselves. And they're in this suffering. I mean, they're in this suffering. But for those who are suffering because of congenital defects, that's the price we had to pay to become humans. Because without those mutations, we wouldn't be what we are now. We'd still be a rudimentary, whatever RNA or DNA organism we'd be, because there would be no room to grow.
We're the perfect creation from God, though. So, I mean, if God created us as perfect as it said in the Quran, then I would counter-argue to your point right now. Like,
God himself says in the Quran that we were created with stages. Adam wasn't just one Adam. Adam started from one. It talks about bringing clay all the way to the actual prophet Adam. And it talks about how we created you and said and will test you to help you. Why does God test the believers? It's to improve them.
Right. In the beginning, you were talking about the start of life. It's suffering going on because right as those sperms are moving through the tubes, there's a big wars going on. But it's so big, and guess what? We were the victors. You see, so when people say, when they're talking about struggle, to me, I say it started out the gate, baby. The idea of struggle. You were struggling from the blast, okay? And so ultimately, through this amazing struggle, right, you arrived. And then Allah says, through your life, we talk about this word all the time, your jihad, your struggle, because they talk about it from their perspective. We know that the first level of struggle that the Prophet said that you'll go through is the struggle of yourself. We all sat here and said, hey, listen, this is a struggle to maintain our Islam. So in the days of the Rasul, some of the companions said to him, listen, when we're with you, we good. When we leave, we struggle. So struggle is good. Going back to the whole suffering piece. Sometimes I love nature shows, right? But have you ever seen a lion kill a little baby zebra? And do you think the mother zebra sitting there not suffering? But this is a part of the evolution of keeping that system in play, I mean, the bear is waiting for the salmon to swim upstream to snatch it out the water, and the alligator is waiting for the wildebeest to come through the river, and suffering all around. Everybody's suffering, you see? All forms of life, from the rudimentary forms, and that's why I use that example of the fungus, destroying some parts of the life that's still alive on the floor floor, and it's suffering. Because I want to live, and then you should see some of the stuff that's trying to live, but the fungus is saying, no, you can't live. I'm stressing you out. But when we become, Allah said, I want one part of my life to know me, and I'm making you.
I think I would just counter-argue at that point by just saying that.
Come on, counter.
that whole process is put in place by God, just like the nature of life, right?
Right.
But I think it's different when human beings are killing each other.
Sure.
There's no lions killing each other unless they're trying to protect their territory. All those things that are happening nowadays is beyond what nature is supposed to be like.
Right.
So why are these things happening?
He said we're not following the commandments.
Right.
Good. So it taught I sitting here and I'm just stunned at this conversation because we have these conversations. Take for instance, we just come out of the month of Ramadan. And when we looked at the month of Ramadan, I remember when it started, and ISIS and a couple of these groups, were doing stuff. I was saying, this is crazy, it's the beginning of it. But it went all the way through. They kept going all the way through the month of Ramadan. Killing people and whatnot and whatever. And then it was coming up, and these are the people that were saying, they're Muslims and the Muslims are doing this. And then when you look back, they're killing more Muslims than they're killing anybody else. Not only that, they started to do it in the month of Ramadan. That's stuff a lot. Then we look at what's going on in the world. All this stuff is going on in the world. And we in the West really have to be careful. Because see, if you have a headache, you take an aspirin. If it hurts a little bit tomorrow, you take a stronger aspirin. So you take the aspirin because you want to get rid of the headache. Not thinking that the headache is giving you a signal that something else may be wrong. So we keep taking the aspirin, then one day you fall over dead and say, what happened? He was just fine because he wasn't listening to the signal. He was only listening to the signal. He didn't try to find out the cause. So when we see all this stuff going on today, they have everybody focusing on the symptoms. What is the cause? What is supposed to be happening at this particular time? We are in a total spiritual warfare.
So can I get some people solve this point? Because I gotta go because I gotta pick up somebody. But he's saying, okay, people killing each other, and all kinds of madness. They're making a choice, and that's what God says makes you unique. I'm giving you the choice. You have the choice to pull the trigger. You see, I'm not making you pull the trigger. You've made a decision, and that's what sets us aside from the rest. He said, "You are the pinnacle of my creation." But I gave you something that I didn't give anybody else. Any parts of my life. As a matter of fact, it all said, "I don't want it."
So I think bringing it back to the conversation of what God allowed, like why is God allowing this to happen? How would we answer that question?
There's a couple different types of suffering, right? There's suffering that happens to someone who you can. Yeah, sorry. There's like you gotta look at it from a very analytical perspective. There's some suffering that happens because we screwed up, right? We do something, and whether we realize it or not, we end up suffering because of it. But then there's a suffering that happens for somebody who's totally innocent, like a child, that ends up being born with some kind of messed up disease or something like that. That's the harder one to answer. The first one's pretty easy to answer. You can just say, look back on something you did, you didn't realize what you were doing, and now you're paying the price for it. And then another simple answer for general suffering is that, like everybody said already, in order for you to understand happiness, you have to have suffering. In order for you to understand that it's hot out, you have to feel cold. You know what I mean? Like you can't have one without the other. It doesn't make sense. It's just impossible for the life to be that way. But what about going back to that? The kid that's born with cancer, or the kid that gets born into a horrible life, or something like that. This was brought up in one of the. Actually, you were there. The regional tabligh thing. You remember? You might have not been there the whole day, but this was brought up as one of the questions. And the way Rizwan Khan answered it was that we are basically thinking that we have some right to a perfect or happy life when we're born. But that means we're putting that demand on God, that He owes us this. He doesn't owe us anything. He created us. He can do whatever He wants with us. We're His creation. And that's kind of on the surface, when you first hear it, it's like a slap in the face kind of thing. But that is who God is. I mean, at the end of the day, He's our God. He could be our friend, but He doesn't have to be our friend, right? He could be providing for us, but He doesn't have to. And just to say that, and you could say that, you're a Muslim and you're doing your prayers, and these ISIS guys, I'm sure they're fasting and they're doing, they're doing the basic stuff that Islam teaches them to do. So why are they so misguided? Why is God not guiding them? God doesn't owe them guidance just because they're doing certain things. Just like He doesn't owe us blessings or a happy life because we're doing certain things. And that's where some of the randomness comes in, where it's not necessarily like a formula. It's not necessarily, which I don't know. I haven't thought about that hard enough, because deep in your heart, depending on your heart and your soul, I think it is a formula. But it's so deep and so subtle that we wouldn't be able to really put it into a mathematical formula type of deal, right? It wouldn't be based on your actions. It's based on your soul and your feeling and your heart, and your relationship in that way. But what we can do for next time is we should have probably stopped a few minutes ago, so we could have done the work together. But if you want, I can try to look up. I can get a little bit better answer from Rizwan Khan about this, and we can even think about other things that are commonly attributed. I heard one the other day in Surah Baqarah. There's a verse that says, the disbelievers mock at the religion, and God will mock at them. So people say, this God you have, He mocks at people. What kind of God? If you're God, if you can do whatever you want, why would you mock someone? That doesn't make any sense. So that's one of the things. There's a lot of different things like that people say that, okay, But I think, if you're trying to understand it for yourself.
I think your answer to the second part of it makes sense to me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We don't have the right to demand a perfect life, right?
Exactly, yeah. That makes sense.
That was his answer. That was not my answer, yeah. And it was just that simple. And that's what it is. So it's good. Rizwan Khan? He'll do a Periscope for us. But yeah, why don't we think of these things? Somebody's phone's ringing, and especially I think personally, if they're bothering you personally, that's the most important thing to figure out. And then if it's something that a friend or a brother or a sister or a relative or somebody's been asking you and you can't get them to figure it out, then that's the second most important thing. And then other things would be things that random people are going to ask you or you're going to find on the internet or whatever, you know. But I think we got to take that approach of our own soul first, you know what I mean, and then go from there.
I was at that discussion with Rich Ryan. It was,
You were there, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
from Jersey, Willenboro.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
an amazing
Yeah.
answer.
And that was such a simple answer, right?
That was it.
That was the
You
answer.
got it right.
Yeah.
You got it right.
Like, who do you think you are with the band that you got? You know, he's out.
Hey, we suffering down here. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, let's break for Maghrib. Sorry, Rafiq Saab, we should have broke a few minutes ago, so we could have done it
no
together.
problem. Just pray for me. That's good enough.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
And we should try to stay on time too. So remind me next time if we start to go over, because you know I don't want people to be thinking that this thing lasts forever and then they don't show up because of that. So, Jazakallah. Conference call in 10 minutes too.